The billionaire forced her into a fake marriage, but her innocence made him fall for real. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. She never thought a single flower arrangement would change everything, but it did. Nariah Evans pressed her fingertips against the cool glass of the shop window, watching the morning rush blur past in shades of grey suits and hurried footsteps. The floriculture shop felt like a sanctuary in the chaos of downtown, a pocket of colour and life where she could breathe, even when the weight of unpaid bills pressed against her chest like stones. "Another late notice," whispered her co-worker, sliding an envelope across the counter. The electricity company's logo glared back at Nariah, and she folded it carefully, adding it to the growing pile in her purse. Her phone buzzed. A text from her younger brother's care facility. "Payment overdue. Please contact us regarding Micah's therapy schedule." Nariah closed her eyes, inhaling the sweet perfume of jasmine and roses. At 25, she'd learned that hope was a luxury she couldn't always afford, but she held on to it anyway, the way her fingers held delicate petals, gently but with purpose. The bell above the door chimed, and she looked up to see an older gentleman in an expensive coat, his silver hair perfectly styled despite the morning wind. His eyes were kind but tired, carrying the weight of someone who'd seen too much of the world. "I need something special," he said softly. "For my wife. She's forgetting things lately." Nariah's heart clenched. She guided him to a corner where white orchids bloomed beside baby's breath, their simplicity speaking louder than any grand gesture. As she arranged the flowers, the man shared memories of his wife, how she used to garden, how her laugh filled their home, how love looked different now but hadn't diminished. "You have a gift," he murmured, watching her work. "Not just with flowers, with hearts." 3 hours later, Nariah had forgotten about that moment entirely. She was focused on the pediatric appointment reminder for Micah, calculating if she could afford both his therapy and groceries this week, when her phone rang. "Miss Evans, my name is Harrison Cole. I represent Mr. Theodore Langston of Langston International. He'd like to meet with you." "I think you have the wrong number. The florist who helped Walter Pemberton this morning, Mr. O. Langston would very much like to speak with you. Today, if possible." Nariah's hands trembled. Theodore Langston. Even she knew that name. Billionaire hotel mogul, his face on magazine covers, his empire stretching across continents. What could he possibly want with her? The Langston Tower pierced the sky like a glass arrow, and Nariah felt impossibly small as she rode the elevator to the 42nd floor. Her simple black dress, her only decent one, felt inadequate among the marble and crystal that surrounded her. Harrison Cole greeted her with a professional smile, leading her through corridors lined with awards and photographs of luxury properties. But nothing prepared her for the office at the end of the hall. Theodore Langston stood with his back to her, silhouetted against floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city like a painting. When he turned, Nariah's breath caught. He was devastatingly handsome in the way that men with too much power often were, sharp jawline, dark hair with silver threads at the temples, eyes the color of steel. But there was something else. Something that made her chest tighten with unexpected recognition. He looked haunted. "Miss Evans." His voice was deep, controlled. "Thank you for coming." "I don't understand why I'm here, Mr. Langston." He studied her for a long moment, and she fought the urge to fidget under his gaze. "Walter Pemberton is on my board of directors. He told me about your kindness this morning, your authenticity." "I was just doing my job." "Were you?" He moved closer, and she caught the scent of expensive cologne, mixed with something warmer, coffee maybe, or the lingering trace of exhaustion. "When was the last time someone in this city showed genuine compassion without expecting anything in return?" Nariah frowned. "People do kind things every day. Not in my world." The bitterness in his voice surprised her. "In my world, everything has a price. Every smile is calculated, every gesture serves a purpose." He walked to his desk, picking up a folder thick with documents. "I have a proposition for you, Miss Evans, one that could solve both our problems." "What problems?" "You need financial security. Your brother needs medical care that insurance won't fully cover. And He paused, something flickering across his features. "I need a wife." The words hit her like cold water. "Excuse me?" "A temporary arrangement. 3 months. Long enough to satisfy the board's concerns about my lifestyle choices and stabilize our stock prices. You'd live in my penthouse, appear at necessary social functions, and play the role of loving wife when required. Naraya's mind reeled. You want me to pretend to be married to you? I want you to be married to me, legally, but temporarily. He opened the folder, revealing contracts and financial documents. In return, you'll receive a generous monthly allowance, full medical coverage for your brother, and a substantial settlement when the arrangement ends. She stared at him, searching for some sign that this was an elaborate joke. Why me? Because you're perfect for what I need. Genuine, unconnected to my world. Someone the media will believe I fell for naturally. He leaned against the desk, his expression unreadable. Someone who won't expect this to become real. The offer hung between them like a bridge over a chasm, tempting and terrifying in equal measure. Naraya thought of Micah's sweet smile, of the therapy sessions he might miss, of the electricity bill that would determine whether they had heat next month. I need time to think. You have until tomorrow morning. His tone was final, businesslike. My driver will take you home. Consider it carefully, Miss Evans. Opportunities like this don't come twice. As she rode the elevator down, Naraya caught her reflection in the polished steel doors. The woman staring back looked overwhelmed, uncertain, but not broken, never broken. She touched the simple cross at her throat, a gift from her mother before she passed, and whispered a prayer into the silence. By tomorrow, she would have to choose between the life she knew and the unknown that waited 42 floors above the city. And somewhere in that choice lay the answer to a question she hadn't known she was asking. What would you do if a billionaire offered you everything you needed, but nothing you wanted? The number on the check was more than she'd ever seen in her entire life, but it still felt like selling her soul. Naraya sat cross-legged on her small apartment floor, surrounded by bills spread like fallen leaves. The contract Theodore Langston had given her lay open beside a calculator that seemed to mock her with its blinking display. 3 months, 7 figures, a solution wrapped in silk and tied with golden chains. Her phone rang, breaking the oppressive silence. Naraya? Micah's voice carried that special warmth that always made her smile despite everything. At 19, her brother had the mental capacity of a 12-year-old, but his heart was infinite. Are you coming to see me tomorrow? Of course, sweetheart, I promised, didn't I? Mrs. Hendricks says I might have to stop my art therapy if... His voice caught, confusion bleeding through. I don't understand the money stuff, Naraya. Did I do something wrong? Her chest tightened. No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong. Money stuff is just complicated. Will you fix it? You always fix things. The trust in his voice nearly broke her. I'm trying, Micah. I promise I'm trying. After hanging up, Naraya walked to her narrow kitchen window and stared out at the fire escape where she'd hung laundry that morning. Mrs. Chen from next door was watering her small garden of tomato plants, humming softly to herself. Normal life, simple life, the kind Theodore Langston probably hadn't experienced in decades. She picked up the contract again, reading the terms that would transform her from struggling florist to billionaire's wife. The arrangement seemed clinical, sterile, like a business merger instead of a marriage, even a fake one. Separate bedrooms, limited physical contact for public appearances only, no romantic expectations, complete discretion regarding the nature of the arrangement. Yet something about Theodore had unsettled her, not his wealth or power, but the loneliness she'd glimpsed beneath his controlled exterior. The way he'd said, "In my world, everything has a price," as if he'd forgotten what it meant to give something freely. Her laptop chimed with an email from the care facility where Micah lived. The subject line made her stomach drop. Final notice, account suspension. She opened it with trembling fingers. Dear Miss Evans, due to outstanding balances totaling $12,247, we regret to inform you that therapeutic services for Micah Evans will be suspended effective next Friday unless payment arrangements are made immediately. Naraya closed the laptop and pressed her palms against her eyes. $12,000 might as well have been $12 million. She'd already picked up extra shifts at 2 other flower shops, sold her mother's jewelry, and applied for every assistance program that existed. There was nothing left to sacrifice except her pride, and maybe that was exactly what Theodore Langston was offering to buy. The next morning, Naraya stood outside the imposing glass doors of Langston International, the contract folder clutched in her sweaty palm. The security guard who'd been expecting her escorted her to a different elevator this time, one that required a special key card, and carried her to the penthouse level. Mr. Langston is waiting for you in the residential suite, he said politely. 48th floor. When the elevator opened, Naraya stepped into a world that belonged in magazines. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, while modern furniture in shades of grey and white created an atmosphere of expensive minimalism. Everything was perfect, pristine, and utterly cold. Theodore appeared from what looked like a home office, dressed casually in dark jeans and a navy sweater that made his steel-grey eyes even more intense. Somehow, seeing him outside the corporate setting made him seem more human and more dangerous. "You came back," he observed, noting the folder in her hands. "I have questions." "I expected you would." He gestured toward a seating area near the windows. "Coffee?" "Thank you." She settled onto the impossibly soft sofa, watching him move with quiet efficiency around a kitchen that probably cost more than her annual rent. "Why marriage? Why not just hire an actress to play your girlfriend?" He paused in measuring coffee grounds. "The board wants commitment, stability. Marriage carries legal weight that dating doesn't." He glanced at her over his shoulder. "Besides, actors talk. They have agents, publicists, career ambitions. You have reasons to keep this private." The implication stung even though it was true. "You mean I have more to lose?" "I mean you understand discretion." He brought her coffee in a delicate porcelain cup, sitting across from her with careful distance between them. "Did you read everything?" Naraya nodded, pulling out the pages she'd marked. "The living arrangements. I'd have my own room, but we'd share common areas. Public appearances twice a week, sometimes more for special events. And this," she pointed to a clause that had kept her awake. "Complete availability for the duration of the contract. What does that mean exactly?" "It means for 3 months. Being my wife becomes your full-time job. You'll move in here, leave the flower shop, focus entirely on maintaining the illusion." His expression was unreadable. "Is that a problem? I've never not worked. I've been taking care of myself and Micah since I was 18. And now someone else will take care of you both." Temporarily, she set down her coffee cup, the delicate clink echoing in the vast space. "What happens after? When the 3 months end?" "You get the settlement we discussed, enough to secure Micah's care for years and establish whatever life you want." He leaned forward slightly. "No contact between us afterward. Clean break." The finality in his voice should have been reassuring, but it left her feeling strangely hollow. "And if I say no? Then you go back to your flower shop, I find another solution, and we pretend this conversation never happened." He studied her face. "But you won't say no. How can you be so sure?" "Because you love your brother more than you fear me." His voice gentled unexpectedly. "And because you're running out of time." The truth of it settled between them like a stone. Naraya looked out at the city sprawling below, thinking of Micah's art therapy sessions, of the way his face lit up when he painted, of all the dreams she'd put on hold to keep him safe and happy. She picked up the pen Theodore had placed beside the contract. 3 months, she said quietly. "No extensions, no changes to the terms." "Agreed. And I want to visit Micah twice a week, non-negotiable." "Of course." Her hand hovered over the signature line. "One more thing. I know this is all pretend, but while we're married, even fake married, I won't be disrespected. I won't be treated like an employee or decoration. I might be poor, Mr. Langston, but I have dignity." Something shifted in his expression, surprise, maybe, or recognition. "Understood, Mrs. Langston." The name sent an unexpected shiver through her. She signed quickly before she could change her mind, then watched him add his own bold signature below hers. "When do we start?" she asked. "Now." He stood, extending his hand to help her up. "Welcome to your new life, Naraya." His fingers were warm, steady, and for just a moment, she let herself imagine what it would feel like if this were real. If a man like Theodore Langston could actually fall for someone like her. Then she remembered the contract's most important clause, no romantic expectations, and wondered why that felt like the cruelest term of all. Moving into a penthouse should have felt like a fairy tale. Instead, it felt like stepping into a beautiful prison. Naraya stood in the doorway of what Theodore had designated as her room, holding a single suitcase that contained everything she owned worth keeping. The space was larger than her entire apartment, with a king-sized bed draped in silk, a walk-in closet that echoed when she stepped inside, and windows that offered a view of the city that took her breath away. It was perfect, cold, empty. "The stylist will be here at 3. Theodore's voice came from behind her, professional and distant. "She'll help you select appropriate clothing for tomorrow's event." Naraya turned to find him leaning against the doorframe, hands in his pockets, watching her with an unreadable expression. In his own space, wearing a simple white button-down with the sleeves rolled up, he looked less like a corporate titan and more like a man. A complicated, guarded man, who'd just invited a stranger into his most private sanctuary. "What kind of event?" she asked, setting her suitcase on the pristine bedspread. "Charity gala. 500 of the city's most influential people, all watching to see who Theodore Langston married." His smile was sharp, practiced. "Our debut as husband and wife." The weight of what she'd agreed to hit her anew. "I don't know how to be a billionaire's wife, Theodore. I don't know the rules of your world." "Theo," he said quietly, "if we're going to convince people we're in love, you should probably call me Theo." The intimacy of his actual name felt strange on her tongue. "Theo." She tested it, noticed how his shoulders relaxed slightly at the sound. "What if I mess up? What if people see right through this?" He stepped into the room and she caught that same scent from yesterday. Expensive cologne mixed with something warmer, more human. "You won't. You're naturally gracious, Naraya. Just be yourself." "Myself doesn't wear designer gowns or know which fork to use for salad." "Then I'll teach you." The offer surprised them both, and for a moment something flickered between them. Not attraction exactly, but recognition. Two people trying to navigate impossible circumstances. "Would you like some lunch? I could show you around first." The penthouse tour revealed a man of contradictions. The living spaces were museum-perfect, all clean lines and expensive art, but his home office was lived-in, comfortable, with books stacked on every surface and coffee rings on the desk. The kitchen was state-of-the-art, but clearly used. She could smell garlic and herbs lingering in the air. "You cook?" she asked, running her fingers along the marble countertop. Surprised, he opened the refrigerator, revealing fresh ingredients rather than take-out containers. "I started when I was 12. My parents traveled constantly and the housekeeper was not nurturing." Something in his tone made her look at him more closely. "That must have been lonely." He paused in pulling out sandwich fixings, his hands stilling. "I survived." "Surviving and living aren't the same thing." The words slipped out before she could stop them, and she watched his defenses slam back into place. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." "It's fine," but his voice had gone cool again. "Chicken or turkey?" They ate in careful silence, the vast dining room making their quiet conversation feel intimate despite the space between them. Naraya found herself stealing glances at this man who was now legally her husband, wondering what had shaped him into someone who could buy companionship but seemed to have forgotten how to simply connect. "Tell me about Micah," Theo said suddenly. The unexpected question warmed her. "He's the best person I know. Sweet, funny, sees beauty in everything." She smiled, remembering. "After our parents died, everyone said I should put him in a state facility, that I was too young, that it would ruin my life." Her voice grew fierce. "But he's not a burden. He's my family." "How old were you?" 18, he was 12. She pushed lettuce around her plate. "I worked 3 jobs the first year, slept in hospital waiting rooms, learned every government program that existed. Worth it, though. Watching him grow, seeing him discover his talents." She looked up to find Theo watching her intently. "What?" "Nothing. Most people would have made different choices." "No, most people would have made easier choices." She met his gaze directly. "There's a difference." Something shifted in his expression, a crack in that carefully maintained control. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. "Harrison," he answered, his tone immediately businesslike. "Yes, I know the Times is asking questions." "No, we're not giving interviews yet." A pause. "Fine, set up something casual for next week. Coffee shop, maybe. Make it look spontaneous." As he spoke, Naraya wandered to the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching people move like ants on the sidewalks below. Up here, insulated by wealth and height, it was easy to forget there was a real world of struggle and joy and messy, complicated love. "They want to do a feature story," Theo said, ending the call. "Human interest piece. The billionaire's surprising love story. What will we tell them? The truth, mostly. That we met through your work. That I was immediately taken with your authenticity." He joined her at the window. "We'll say it was love at first sight." "And you think people will believe that?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Why wouldn't they? It happens all the time." "Does it? To men like you?" "What's that supposed to mean?" She turned to face him, studying the sharp angles of his face, the way he held himself like armor against the world. "When was the last time you let yourself feel something real, Theo? Not calculated, not strategic, just real." The question hung between them like a challenge. His jaw tightened, and she thought he might not answer at all. "I don't have that luxury," he said finally. "Everyone has that luxury. Some people just choose to give it up." Before he could respond, the doorbell chimed through the intercom system. The stylist, arriving early with racks of evening gowns and enough jewelry to stock a boutique, as strangers invaded their temporary sanctuary, transforming Naraya into someone she barely recognized. She caught Theo watching her in the mirror. For just a moment, his careful mask slipped, and she saw something that made her breath catch. Hunger. Not for her body, but for something deeper. Something she wasn't sure either of them was ready to name. The contract had been clear. No romantic expectations. But no one had warned her about the danger of hope. She'd never felt more beautiful or more terrified in her entire life. And tonight, the whole world would be watching. Naraya barely recognized herself in the floor-length mirror. The emerald silk gown hugged her curves like water, the color bringing out the warmth in her dark skin and making her eyes sparkle. Diamond earrings, borrowed but real, caught the light with every movement. The stylist had transformed her natural curls into an elegant updo that made her neck look graceful, regal. She looked like she belonged in Theo's world. The problem was, she still felt like an imposter. "You're ready," announced the stylist, packing away her arsenal of makeup and hair tools. "Mr. Langston is going to forget how to breathe when he sees you." If only that were true, Naraya thought. If only any of this were true. She found Theo in the living room, adjusting his cufflinks while staring out at the city lights. He'd changed into a perfectly tailored tuxedo that made him look like he'd stepped off the pages of a magazine. Powerful, untouchable, devastatingly handsome. When he turned and saw her, he went completely still. "Naraya." The word came out like a prayer, barely audible. "Do I look okay?" She smoothed the silk nervously, suddenly aware of how the dress revealed her shoulders, her collarbone, the curve of her waist. "You look—" He seemed to struggle for words, something she'd never seen from the always articulate Theodore Langston. "Perfect. You look perfect." The sincerity in his voice made her chest tighten with dangerous hope. This was just the contract, she reminded herself. He was probably relieved that she could convincingly play the part. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. The ride to the hotel took place in charged silence. Theo's driver navigated through traffic while they sat in the back of the luxury sedan, the space between them feeling both infinite and non-existent. Every time the car turned, Naraya's bare shoulder brushed against his jacket, sending little sparks of awareness through her body. "Remember," Theo said quietly, "we've been together for 6 months. We met when you were arranging flowers for the Pemberton anniversary party. I was immediately smitten by your laugh." "My laugh?" "You have a beautiful laugh, genuine. It's the first thing I noticed about you." He glanced at her profile in the dim light. "When people ask how I proposed, I'll say it was over dinner at Romano's. Small Italian place, nothing flashy. You cried because you said it was the most romantic thing anyone had ever done." The detail in their fabricated love story was both impressive and heartbreaking. "You've thought of everything." "I had to. One inconsistency and the whole thing falls apart." His fingers drummed against his knee, the only sign of his nerves. "Are you ready for this?" She wasn't sure she'd ever be ready, but she nodded anyway. The grand ballroom of the Meridian Hotel sparkled like something from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing lights across marble floors, while hundreds of elegantly dressed guests mingled beneath soaring ceilings. The moment they walked through the entrance, conversations quieted, heads turned, and Naraya felt the weight of every curious gaze. "Smile," Theo murmured against her ear, his hand warm on the small of her back. "You're madly in love with me, remember?" The irony was, it wasn't as hard to pretend as she'd expected. "Theodore." A woman with silver hair and kind eyes approached them, her smile genuine. "And this must be the mysterious bride we've heard so much about. Eleanor, I'd like you to meet my wife, Naraya." "Naraya, this is Eleanor Richmond. She sits on the hospital board with me." "It's lovely to meet you," Naraya said, accepting the woman's outstretched hand. "Theo's told me so much about the work you do." "Has he now?" Eleanor's eyes twinkled with amusement. "How refreshing to see our Theodore so relaxed. You must be quite special, dear." "She is," Theo said, and something in his tone made Naraya look at him sharply, but his expression was perfectly controlled, giving nothing away. The evening became a blur of introductions, handshakes, and carefully rehearsed responses. Theo never left her side, his hand constantly touching her, at her waist, on her arm, fingers intertwined with hers. To everyone watching, they looked like newlyweds who couldn't bear to be apart. The touching felt natural, too natural. "You're a natural at this," she whispered, during a lull in conversation. "At what?" "Pretending to be in love." Something flickered across his face, too quick for her to interpret. "So are you." During dinner, seated at the head table, Naraya found herself genuinely enjoying conversations with the other guests. She spoke passionately about literacy programs, shared stories about Micah's art, and listened with genuine interest to others' experiences. She forgot to be nervous, forgot to watch every word. She was just herself. "Your wife is delightful," she heard someone tell Theo. "Where on earth did you find her?" "She found me," he replied, his eyes meeting Naraya's across the table. "In a flower shop of all places. Changed my entire world in a single afternoon." The way he said it, with such quiet conviction, made her heart skip. For a moment she could almost believe he meant it. When the dancing began, Theo led her onto the floor without a word. His hand settled at her waist, fingers intertwining with hers, and suddenly they were moving together like they'd done this 1,000 times before. "You dance beautifully," she said, surprised by his grace. Mandatory lessons as a child, along with piano, fencing, and proper dinner conversation. His mouth quirked with bitter humor. Everything a future businessman needs to navigate society. What about what Theodore needed? What did he want to learn? The question seemed to catch him off guard. They turned slowly, her dress flowing around them like liquid emerald, the rest of the room fading into soft focus. "No one ever asked me that," he said finally. "I'm asking now." He was quiet for so long, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, so softly she almost missed it. "I wanted to learn how to make people laugh, how to tell stories that mattered, how to—" He stopped, shaking his head. "How to what?" "How to make someone love me for who I was, not what I could provide." The admission hung between them, raw and vulnerable, and Naraya's heart broke a little for the lonely boy who'd grown into this guarded man. "Theo," she started, but the song was ending and the spell was breaking. As they walked back to their table, Theo's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it and his entire body tensed. "What is it?" she asked. "Photographer from the Tribune. He's been here all night." His jaw tightened. "The photos will be in tomorrow's society pages. The whole city will know about us by morning. Isn't that what we wanted?" "Yes." But he looked like a man walking toward his own execution. "Everything changes now, Naraya. There's no going back." As they said their goodbyes and headed for the exit, she caught their reflection in the hotel's mirrored walls. A beautiful couple, perfectly matched, looking like they belonged together. It was the most convincing lie she'd ever been part of, and the most dangerous truth she'd never expected to discover. Waking up famous was nothing like she'd imagined, and neither was the man bringing her coffee at sunrise. Naraya stirred to the sound of gentle knocking on her bedroom door, sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows she'd forgotten to cover. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was. The silk sheets, the view of the city, the distant sound of classical music playing somewhere in the penthouse. Then it all came flooding back. The gala, the dancing, the way Theo had looked at her when she'd asked about his childhood dreams. "Come in," she called, sitting up and pulling the covers around herself. Theo appeared in the doorway, already dressed in dark jeans and a grey sweater, carrying a steaming mug that smelled like heaven. He looked different in the morning light, younger somehow, his hair slightly mussed, his usual corporate armor replaced by something more human. "Good morning, Mrs. Langston," he said, offering her the coffee with a small smile. "You made quite an impression last night. Did I embarrass you?" The worry had been nagging at her since she'd woken up. "Embarrass me?" He sat on the edge of her bed, a gesture so casually intimate it made her breath catch. "Naraya, you were magnificent. Eleanor Richmond asked for your number. The hospital board wants to invite you to their next planning meeting, and—" He pulled out his phone, scrolling to something that made him shake his head in amazement. "What?" "3 separate society bloggers called you refreshingly authentic. The Tribune's headline reads, 'Theodore Langston's surprising choice charms high society.'" He looked at her with something that might have been pride. "You did exactly what I hoped you'd do. You were yourself." She sipped the coffee, perfectly made, exactly how she liked it, and wondered when he'd learned her preferences. "So the plan worked? Better than I expected." He stood, walking to her windows to give her privacy as she got out of bed and grabbed a robe. "Harrison's been fielding calls all morning. Interview requests, party invitations, magazine features. Everyone wants to know more about the woman who captured Theodore Langston's heart." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. "What happens now?" she asked, joining him at the window. "Now we live like a married couple, at least in public." He turned to face her, and she was struck again by how the morning light softened his sharp edges. "There's a farmer's market in Brooklyn that I thought you might like to see, if you want. We could grab breakfast, walk around, let people see us being normal." The suggestion surprised her. You want to go to a farmer's market? I want you to be comfortable. And I thought, he paused, looking almost shy. I thought it might be nice to do something you'd enjoy. An hour later, they were walking through the bustling Saturday market, Theo looking oddly out of place but somehow perfectly content as Naraya examined heirloom tomatoes and chatted with vendors about seasonal herbs. She'd changed into simple jeans and a flowing top, her hair loose around her shoulders, and he couldn't seem to stop looking at her. Try this, she said, offering him a sample of honey from a local beekeeper. It's made with wildflowers. His fingers brushed hers as he took the small spoon, and the simple contact sent warmth shooting up her arm. It's incredible, he said, his voice slightly rough. Mrs. Patterson at the flower shop taught me about different honeys. She said they're like wines, each one tells the story of where it came from. She bought a small jar, handling the cash, while Theo watched her interact with the elderly vendor with genuine warmth. You never asked for the money, he observed as they walked away. What money? Your allowance. The financial arrangements we discussed, most people would have brought it up by now. She shrugged, pausing to smell lavender at another stall. I trust you to honor our agreement. Besides, I haven't needed anything yet. She looked up at him curiously. Is that unusual? In your experience with women? Something dark flickered across his face. Very unusual. They found a small cafe with outdoor seating, ordering simple breakfast sandwiches, and sitting across from each other at a weathered wooden table. Around them, families with strollers and couples holding hands created a symphony of ordinary happiness that felt like a foreign language to Theo. What was your family like? Naraya asked, watching him people-watch with fascination. Efficient. The word came out bitter. My father built the company from nothing, and my mother made sure we looked perfect doing it. Family dinners were business meetings. Vacations were networking opportunities. Love was... He paused, seeming to search for the right words. Love was a luxury we couldn't afford. That sounds lonely. I didn't know any different. He met her eyes across the small table. What about you? Before the responsibility, before taking care of Micah, what were you like? She smiled, remembering. Loud. I wanted to be a teacher, had this dream of running a literacy program for kids who struggled in school. I used to volunteer at the community center, reading to anyone who'd listen. Her expression grew wistful. I was going to change the world, one story at a time. You still could. After... He didn't finish the sentence, but they both knew what he meant. After the contract ended. After they went back to being strangers. Maybe, but she didn't sound convinced. A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the sounds of the market and the clink of coffee cups. It felt, Naraya realized with a start, like a real date, like getting to know someone you were genuinely interested in, rather than learning lines for a performance. Theo, she said suddenly, last night when you were talking about wanting to learn how to make people love you for who you are, what did you mean? He was quiet for so long, she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. I've had relationships, women who wanted the lifestyle, the status, the access my money provided, but I could never shake the feeling that if I lost everything tomorrow, I'd be alone. He looked directly at her. I've never been loved for just me. The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. I think you're wrong, she said softly. About what? About being unlovable without all the money and power. She leaned forward, her voice earnest. The man who makes perfect coffee without being asked, who thought to take me somewhere I'd feel comfortable, who learned about honey just because I was interested, that man is worth loving. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the carefully maintained walls around his heart. For a moment, she thought he might reach across the table, might touch her hand, might say something that would change everything between them. Instead, his phone rang. Harrison, he answered, his professional mask sliding back into place. What is it? Naraya watched him talk, noting how quickly he transformed from the vulnerable man sharing breakfast with her to the controlled businessman handling crisis management. When he hung up, the moment was gone. Problem? She asked. My ex-fiancé just called a press conference, he said grimly. Apparently she has some things to say about our whirlwind romance. The fairy tale morning shattered around them like glass. What kind of things? The kind that could destroy everything we've built. He stood, already mentally shifting into damage control mode. We need to go home, now. As they walked back through the market, the easy intimacy of the morning replaced by tension and worry, Naraya couldn't help but wonder, what happened when the past refused to stay buried? And what secrets was Theo still keeping from her? Some storms give you warning. Others destroy everything in their path before you even see them coming. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt endless, tension radiating from Theo like heat from a flame. Naraya watched him pace the small space, his jaw clenched, his hands running through his hair in a gesture she was beginning to recognize as his tell when he was barely holding himself together. "Who is she?" she asked quietly. "Your ex-fiancé, Vivienne Blackthorne." The name came out like poison. "We were engaged for 2 years. The wedding was supposed to be last month." Naraya's stomach dropped. "Last month? Theo, what?" "I ended it." He looked at her directly, his eyes dark with something that might have been regret. 3 weeks before you signed that contract, I called off the wedding." The elevator dinged their arrival, but neither moved immediately. "Why?" she whispered. "Because I couldn't stand the thought of spending my life with someone who saw me as an acquisition rather than a person." His laugh was bitter. "Ironic, considering what I asked you to do." Before she could process the implications of that statement, they were walking into the penthouse to find Harrison Cole waiting with a laptop and several manila folders spread across the dining table. "How bad is it?" Theo asked without preamble. Harrison's expression was grim. "See for yourself." He turned the laptop toward them, and Naraya found herself looking at a news conference from earlier that morning. A stunning woman with platinum blonde hair and cold blue eyes stood behind a podium facing a crowd of reporters. "Vivienne Blackthorne, heiress to the Blackthorne shipping fortune," Harrison explained quietly, "also known for her strategic approach to relationships." On screen, Vivienne began to speak, her voice cultured, precise, and absolutely venomous. "I'm deeply saddened by the reports of Theodore's sudden marriage," she said, dabbing at eyes that showed no signs of actual tears. "While I wish him happiness, I feel compelled to share my concerns about this relationship." Theo's hand found Naraya's back, a protective gesture that felt automatic. "Theodore has been struggling with personal demons for months," Vivienne continued. "His decision to end our engagement came during what I can only describe as a mental health crisis. This impulsive marriage to a complete stranger, someone with no background, no family, no resources of her own, suggests he's still not thinking clearly." Naraya felt the blood drain from her face. Beside her, Theo had gone absolutely still. Furthermore, Vivienne's voice grew sharper. "I have reason to believe this marriage is a sham, designed to manipulate public opinion and salvage his business reputation. Theodore Langston is many things, but a romantic is not one of them." The press conference continued with increasingly pointed questions and barely veiled accusations, but Harrison closed the laptop. "The story's already been picked up by 6 major outlets," he said. "Social media is not kind." "Show me," Naraya said, surprising both men. "Naraya, you don't need to see." "Show me, Theo." Reluctantly, Harrison pulled up his phone. The comments were brutal. Gold digger, opportunist, rebound mistake. Photos from the gala had been dissected and analyzed, with so-called body language experts claiming to detect obvious signs of a transactional relationship. "It doesn't matter," Theo said firmly, though his voice was tight with anger. "We stick to the plan. This will blow over." "Will it?" Naraya set down the phone, looking between the two men. "Because she's not wrong, is she? About the marriage being fake." Harrison shifted uncomfortably. "I should let you two discuss this privately." After he left, the penthouse felt suffocating despite its vast space. Theo poured himself a scotch with shaking hands, while Naraya sank into one of the pristine white chairs. "Tell me about her," she said quietly. "The real story." Theo drained half his glass before answering. "We met at a charity function 5 years ago. She was beautiful, sophisticated, everything I thought I should want in a wife." He laughed bitterly. "Our families approved. The merger of our companies would have created one of the largest hospitality empires in the world. But she was planning the wedding before I'd even properly proposed, choosing flowers, booking venues, sending save the dates." He sat across from her, his expression haunted. "I realized she wasn't marrying me. She was marrying my potential, my assets, my social position." Naraya felt something cold settle in her chest. "And what am I doing? That's different." "Is it?" She leaned forward, studying his face. "You're paying me to play a role, Theo. You chose me because I was safe, remember? Because I wouldn't expect it to become real." "Naraya, she's right about one thing. You're not a romantic. You don't believe in love, at least not for yourself." The realization hurt more than she'd expected. "This morning at the market, I thought, but it was just another performance, wasn't it?" "No." The word came out fierce, desperate. "What happened this morning was real. You were real. Then what happens when the 3 months are up? Do I get discarded like she did? The question hung between them like a blade. Theo set down his glass, his hands clenching and unclenching. I didn't discard Vivian. I chose honesty over convenience. And what are you choosing with me? Before he could answer, his phone rang again. This time it was a number Naraya didn't recognize. Don't answer it, she said, but he was already accepting the call. Theodore Langston. Even from across the room, she could hear the female voice on the other end, syrupy, sweet, and unmistakably threatening. Hello, darling. Enjoying the press coverage? Theo's entire body went rigid. What do you want, Vivian? To talk, just the two of us, like civilized adults. Her laugh was like breaking glass. I'm in the lobby of your building. Security is being very accommodating. Absolutely not. Oh, but I think you will. Unless you'd prefer I hold my next press conference from your doorstep. I have such interesting stories to tell about our relationship, Theodore. About the things you did, the promises you made, the secrets you keep. Naraya watched his face go ashen. 5 minutes, Vivian continued. That's all I need. Send your little actress away, and we can discuss this like adults. The line went dead. Theo stared at his phone as if it were a poisonous snake, then looked at Naraya with something that might have been panic. I have to see her, he said. No, you don't. You don't understand. She has information, things that could destroy not just the company, but innocent people who depend on me. He stood, already moving toward the door. I have to handle this. Theo, wait! But he was already gone, leaving Naraya alone in the penthouse with the echoes of Vivian's threats and the terrible certainty that whatever secrets Theo was hiding, they were about to explode in both their faces. She walked to the window, looking down at the street below, and wondered if this was how every fairy tale ended once you looked too closely. With the princess realizing the castle was built on quicksand and the prince was just another lost soul wearing a crown. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Ask him about the accident. Ask him why he really needs a wife. Ask him what he's so afraid of losing. Naraya's hands trembled as she read the message again. What had she gotten herself into? Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. Sometimes it destroys everything you thought you knew about the person you're falling for. Naraya paced the penthouse like a caged animal, the mysterious text message burning in her mind. Ask him about the accident. What accident? What was Vivian talking about, and why did Theo look like he'd seen a ghost when she'd threatened him? An hour passed, then 2. She tried calling him, straight to voicemail, tried texting, no response. The silence stretched until she couldn't bear it anymore, and she found herself doing something she'd never imagined, snooping through Theo's home office. The room felt intimate, personal in a way the rest of the penthouse didn't. Books on architecture and hospitality management lined the shelves, but tucked between them were unexpected treasures: a worn copy of poetry by Maya Angelou, a photography book about small-town America, a journal with a leather cover so soft it must have been handled countless times. She shouldn't look. She knew she shouldn't, but her fingers were already opening the journal to a random page, dated 3 years ago. Another board meeting today. They want me to expand into Europe, but something feels wrong about the acquisition. The numbers don't add up, and when I questioned the due diligence report, Harrison changed the subject too quickly. Sometimes I wonder if I'm the only one who actually cares about doing business ethically, or if I'm just naive. Vivian called again about wedding venues. She's already put deposits down on 3 different locations without asking me. When I told her I preferred something smaller, more intimate, she laughed and said, "Intimate doesn't photograph well for the society pages." I'm starting to wonder if she sees me at all, or just the lifestyle I can provide. God, I'm lonely. Naraya's heart clenched at the raw honesty in his handwriting. She flipped through more pages, finding entries that painted a picture of a man struggling with isolation, questioning his business decisions, wondering if anyone truly knew him. Then she found the entry that made her blood run cold. It's been 6 months since the accident. 6 months since I killed someone. I keep telling myself it wasn't my fault. The police report cleared me. The other driver ran the red light. He was drunk, speeding, completely in the wrong. But that doesn't change the fact that a 22-year-old kid is dead because I was in that intersection at that exact moment. His name was Danny Morrison. He was a college senior, studying to be a teacher. He had a girlfriend who was planning to propose to him after graduation. Found that out from the news coverage. His parents spoke at the sentencing hearing for the drunk driver, talked about all the things Danny would never get to do. I sent flowers to the funeral, anonymous. What else could I do? How do you apologize for being the immovable object that stopped someone's entire future? The company's lawyers handled everything, made sure my name stayed out of most of the coverage, paid for the best accident reconstruction experts, ensured there would be no civil suits. But I can't stop thinking about that moment, the sound of impact, the way everything went so quiet afterward. Vivian says I need to let it go, that dwelling on it is unhealthy. She doesn't understand that some things should be dwelled on. Some guilt is earned. I dream about him sometimes, about Danny Morrison. Wonder what he'd think of the man who lived while he died. Wonder if he'd forgive me for surviving. Naraya's hands shook as she closed the journal. This was what Vivian was threatening to expose, not just the accident itself, but Theo's role in it. Even though he'd been cleared legally, the emotional toll was obvious, and in the wrong hands, twisted by someone malicious. The sound of the elevator arriving made her jump. She quickly replaced the journal and hurried back to the living room, trying to look like she hadn't just uncovered the secret that was eating Theo alive. When he walked through the door, he looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past few hours. His hair was disheveled, his tie loosened, and there was something broken in his eyes that made her want to hold him and never let go. "How did it go?" she asked, though his expression already told her the answer. "About as well as you'd expect." He poured himself another scotch, his movements mechanical. "She wants money, a lot of it, and a public statement that our marriage is a business arrangement." "What did you tell her?" "That she could go to hell." He drank half the glass in one swallow, which predictably did not improve the situation. Naraya watched him carefully, seeing new layers now, the guilt he carried, the weight of secrets, the way he held himself like someone expecting punishment. "Theo, there's something I need to ask you." Something in her tone made him look at her sharply. "What?" "After you left, I got a text from someone who seemed to know things about you, about an accident." The glass slipped from his hands, shattering against the marble floor. Amber liquid spread like blood across the pristine surface. "Shit." He knelt to collect the pieces, but his hands were shaking too badly to be effective. "Leave it," Naraya said gently, kneeling beside him. "Theo, talk to me. You don't understand. If this gets out twisted the right way on," he looked at her with desperate eyes, "it could destroy everything. The company, jobs, people who depend on me. Tell me what happened." For a long moment he just stared at the broken glass. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he told her about that night 3 years ago, the intersection, the drunk driver who ran the red light, the impact that killed a young man with his whole life ahead of him. "The worst part," he said, finally meeting her eyes, "is that everyone tells me it wasn't my fault. The police, the lawyers, the accident reconstruction team, everyone except the voice in my head that won't stop asking what if. What if I'd left work 5 minutes later? What if I'd taken a different route? What if I'd somehow seen him coming and—" "Stop!" Naraya reached for his hands, stilling their trembling. "Theo, listen to me. Survivor's guilt is real, but it doesn't make you responsible for someone else's choices. Easy for you to say. You didn't kill someone. Neither did you. A drunk driver killed someone. You were just there." He pulled his hands away, standing abruptly. "Vivian knows exactly how to spin this. Billionaire uses marriage to distract from fatal car accident. Theodore Langston's dark secret. The headlines write themselves. So we fight back. We tell the truth." "The truth?" He laughed bitterly. "The truth is that I'm exactly what she said I am. Someone who can't form real relationships, who solves problems with money, who's so damaged that I had to hire someone to pretend to love me." The words hit Naraya like a physical blow. "Is that really what you think this is? Still? What else could it be?" But there was uncertainty in his voice, hope and fear warring in his expression. She stood slowly, moving closer to him. "Maybe it started that way. But Theo, what I feel for you now, the way you make me laugh, the way you remember how I like my coffee, the way you took me to that market because you wanted me to be happy." She reached for his face, making him look at her. "That's not fake, at least not for me." For a moment she thought he might kiss her. His eyes dropped to her lips. His breathing changed, and the space between them felt charged with possibility. Then his phone rang. Harrison's name flashed on the screen, and Theo's expression hardened back into professional control. "What is it?" he answered. "Turn on Channel 7 News. Now." They rushed to the television, and Naraya's heart sank as she saw the breaking news banner. Exclusive. The real reason behind Theodore Langston's secret marriage. A reporter stood outside the building where Danny Morrison had lived, interviewing his former girlfriend, now a kindergarten teacher with kind eyes and a gentle voice. "Danny would have hated this," she was saying. using his memory to hurt someone else. The accident was tragic, but Mr. Langston wasn't at fault. He sent flowers to Danny's funeral, anonymously. He started a scholarship fund in Danny's name. He's been quietly supporting Danny's parents ever since. The camera cut to Danny's father, a weathered man in work clothes. That Mr. Langston, he never forgot Danny. Calls us every year on the anniversary. Real quiet about it, never wanted any publicity. If he's found love with this girl, good for him. Danny would want people to be happy. Naraya looked at Theo in amazement. You've been supporting them, the scholarship fund. He couldn't meet her eyes. It was the least I could do. But you never told anyone. You let the guilt eat at you instead of, because it doesn't matter. The words exploded out of him. Don't you see? It doesn't matter what good I've tried to do. That boy is still dead and I'm still here, and nothing I do will ever change that. She saw it then. The real reason he'd chosen her. Not just because she was safe, but because he didn't believe he deserved real love. Because he'd convinced himself that someone who'd been present at another person's death didn't deserve happiness. Theo, she said softly, you're not responsible for someone else's choices, and you're not disqualified from love because you survived something terrible. This time when he looked at her, there were tears in his eyes. What if you're wrong, he whispered. What if I don't deserve this, any of this? Then I guess we'll find out together. And somewhere in that promise, Naraya realized the truth that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. She wasn't pretending anymore. She was falling in love with Theodore Langston. Guilt, secrets, broken pieces and all. The moment when everything changes is rarely dramatic. Sometimes it's as quiet as a confession whispered in the dark. The penthouse felt different after the news broadcast, lighter somehow, as if the weight of hidden secrets had finally been lifted from its walls. Theo sat on the couch, head in his hands, while Naraya moved around the kitchen making tea, giving him space to process what had just happened. Danny Morrison's family had defended him, publicly. The very people who had every right to hate him had instead shown the world who he really was. Not the cold businessman Vivian painted, but someone who quietly carried guilt and tried to make amends in the shadows. The stock price is already recovering, Harrison's voice came through the speakerphone. Vivian's credibility took a major hit when Danny's girlfriend spoke. The narrative has completely flipped. Good, Theo said quietly. What about Vivian? Radio silence. Her publicist released a statement about respecting the grieving process and withdrawing from public discussion. Translation, she's retreating before this gets worse for her. After Harrison hung up, silence settled over them again. Naraya brought Theo a mug of chamomile tea, settling beside him on the couch with careful distance between them. How do you feel? She asked. He was quiet for a long time, staring into the golden liquid. Exhausted, relieved, terrified. He glanced at her. Confused. About what? About you. About this. He set down the mug, turning to face her fully. About what happens now. The question hung between them, like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. The contract was clear. 1 more month, then they'd part ways with generous compensation and no contact. But the woman sitting beside him wasn't the same person who'd signed those papers, and neither was he. Naraya, he started, then stopped, running a hand through his hair. I need to tell you something. Okay. When I first approached you, I thought I had everything figured out. Find someone genuine but temporary, someone who wouldn't get attached, someone who would take the money and walk away clean. His voice grew quieter. I thought I was protecting both of us from complications. She waited, sensing there was more. But somewhere between the farmer's market and tonight, between watching you charm Eleanor Richmond and seeing you comfort me through the worst crisis of my life, he met her eyes directly. I stopped pretending. Her breath caught. Theo, I know what the contract says, I know what we agreed to, but I need you to know that whatever this is between us, it's real for me now. Has been for days, maybe weeks. He reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. I'm in love with you, Naraya. Not the role you're playing, not the performance we put on for others, you. The words she'd been hoping and fearing to hear finally spoken aloud. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she processed the magnitude of what he was offering. Not just his feelings, but the vulnerability that came with them. The scared, guilt-ridden workaholic billionaire who doesn't know how to ask for what he wants, she said softly. That's who you think I fell for, did you? The hope and terror in his voice made her chest ache. Fall for him, I mean. Instead of answering with words, she leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, like a question being asked. Then his hands found her face, her fingers tangled in his hair, and the kiss deepened into something that tasted like honesty and felt like coming home. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Naraya rested her forehead against his. "Yes," she whispered, "I fell for him. For you. Completely. Even knowing about Danny? About the accident? Especially knowing about that." She pulled back to look at him directly. "Theo, the way you've carried that guilt, the way you've tried to make amends, it doesn't make you broken. It makes you human. It makes you someone worth loving." This time, when he kissed her, it was with the desperate relief of a man who'd been holding his breath for 3 years and could finally exhale. They made love slowly, carefully, like people discovering something precious they were afraid might break. In the soft light of the bedroom, with the city sprawling below them, they mapped each other's bodies with the reverence of explorers finding new continents. Afterward, as they lay tangled in silk sheets, Naraya traced patterns on Theo's chest while he played with her hair. "What happens now?" she asked, echoing his earlier question. "I don't know," he admitted. "The contract—" "Forget the contract." She propped herself up on her elbow to look at him. "What do you want to happen? I want to wake up next to you tomorrow, and the day after that, and every day for as long as you'll have me." His voice grew stronger with each word. "I want to meet Micah properly as your boyfriend, not your business arrangement. I want to take you to dinner at places that aren't photo opportunities. I want to fight with you about what movie to watch and learn how you take your coffee when you're sick and find out if you snore." She laughed. "I do snore. A little. Perfect. I want to love all of it. All of you. Even the part that comes from poverty, that doesn't understand your world. Especially that part. You keep me grounded, Naraya. You remind me what matters." He pulled her closer. "Besides, I'm pretty sure my world could use more people like you in it." They talked until dawn, making plans and promises, dreaming out loud about a future neither had dared imagine when they'd first shaken hands on a business deal. As sunlight began to stream through the windows, Naraya realized she'd never been happier to break a contract in her life. "There's just one problem," Theo said, his voice heavy with mock seriousness. "What's that?" "We'll have to tell people our love story was fake, that we got married for business reasons." He grinned. "Think anyone will believe us?" Naraya laughed, the sound filling the quiet bedroom with joy. "Probably not. We're terrible actors." "The worst," he agreed, pulling her down for another kiss. Outside, the city was waking up to a new day. Inside the penthouse, two people who'd entered a marriage of convenience were discovering that the best kind of love was the kind that snuck up on you when you weren't looking, the kind that started with a contract and ended with a choice, the kind that made you realize home wasn't a place. It was a person, and sometimes, if you were very lucky, that person was lying right next to you, planning to stay forever. Love is easy in a penthouse with perfect lighting, but real relationships are built in the messy, ordinary moments that nobody photographs. "Naraya!" Micah's voice carried across the recreation room of Sunrise Care Facility, pure joy lighting up his face as he spotted her walking through the door. But when he saw the tall man beside her, his enthusiasm shifted to curious shyness. "Hey, sweetheart." Naraya hugged her brother tight, breathing in the familiar scent of his favorite apple shampoo. "I brought someone I want you to meet." Micah peered around her at Theo, who stood with his hands in his pockets, looking more nervous than she'd ever seen him. The past week since their confession had been a whirlwind of lawyers dissolving contracts, media interviews about their real love story, and quiet moments learning each other's daily rhythms. But this, introducing Theo to the most important person in her life, felt like the biggest step of all. "This is Theodore," she said gently, "but you can call him Theo. He's my boyfriend." The word felt strange after months of saying husband, but also more honest somehow. "Are you the one who's been making my sister smile funny?" Micah asked with the directness that always made Naraya's heart squeeze. "Smile funny?" Theo glanced at her with amusement. "Like this." Micah demonstrated an exaggerated, dreamy expression that made Naraya laugh despite her embarrassment. "I hope so," Theo said seriously, crouching down to Micah's eye level. "Your sister tells me you're an incredible artist." Micah's entire face lit up. "Want to see my paintings?" For the next hour, Naraya watched something beautiful unfold. Theo listened with genuine interest as Micah explained his artwork, bold, colorful pieces that captured emotions more than realistic details. He asked thoughtful questions, praised specific techniques, and when Micah showed him a painting of a thunderstorm, Theo said quietly, "You really understand how powerful nature can be." That's how I felt when Naraya was sad about money, Micah explained. All dark and scary inside, but then the storm goes away, see? He pointed to a corner of the canvas where yellow sun broke through grey clouds. There's always sun after. Theo's eyes found Naraya's across the room, and she saw her brother's simple wisdom hitting him like revelation. You're very wise, Micah, Theo said. Naraya says that too, but I think she's wiser. She takes care of everybody. During the drive back to the penthouse, Theo was quieter than usual. What are you thinking about? Naraya asked. How lucky you are, how lucky I am. He reached for her hand across the center console. He's amazing, Naraya. Pure heart, just like you said. He likes you, I can tell. How can you tell? Because he showed you his storm painting. He only shows that one to people he trusts. She squeezed his fingers. He's protective of me, you know, in his own way. That evening, they attempted to cook dinner together. A disaster involving burned salmon, smoke alarms, and Naraya laughing so hard she cried while Theo stared at the charred mess with genuine bewilderment. I don't understand, he said, poking at the blackened fish with a fork. I followed the recipe exactly. The recipe said medium heat, Theo, not volcanic eruption. They ended up ordering pizza and eating it on the living room floor, sharing stories about their worst cooking disasters. Naraya learned that Theo once set a kitchen towel on fire trying to make scrambled eggs at boarding school, and Theo discovered that she'd once attempted to make a birthday cake for Micah that collapsed so spectacularly they'd eaten it with spoons directly from the pan. We're hopeless, she said, leaning against his shoulder. Speak for yourself. I make excellent coffee, and I can arrange flowers that don't look like they're dying. Perfect. We'll never starve or live in an ugly house. These moments, silly, imperfect, utterly ordinary, felt more precious to Naraya than any gala or penthouse luxury. This was what she'd never dared hope for, someone to laugh with during disasters, someone who listened to her stories, someone who saw her brother's paintings and understood their significance. The next morning brought new challenges. Harrison arrived with a stack of legal documents and a concerned expression. The board is asking questions, he said without preamble, about the change in your personal situation. Some of them are wondering if this affects your judgment, your focus on business. Theo's jaw tightened. My personal life is none of their concern. Unfortunately, they disagree. Westfield and Morrison want to meet with you tomorrow. They're concerned about the company's image, the recent media attention, the unconventional nature of your relationship. Naraya felt something cold settle in her stomach. They don't approve of me. They don't approve of anything that might affect quarterly reports, Harrison corrected gently. And love stories, even real ones, can be seen as distractions. After Harrison left, Theo paced the living room like a caged animal. They can't dictate my personal life, he muttered. Can't they? Naraya curled up on the couch, watching him wear a path in the expensive rug. Theo, if being with me hurts your business, don't. He stopped pacing, fixing her with an intense stare. Don't even think about finishing that sentence. But if it comes down to choosing, there is no choice, not anymore. He sat beside her, taking her hands in his. Naraya, listen to me. I spent years building a company, accumulating wealth, gaining respect from people who measure worth in profit margins. And for what? So I could be surrounded by luxury while feeling completely empty inside. His thumbs traced circles on her palms, grounding them both. You changed that. Not the fake marriage, not the contract. You. The way you make me laugh, the way you see beauty in small things, the way you love your brother unconditionally. His voice grew fierce. I'm not giving that up for a boardroom full of men who've never experienced real connection in their lives. What if they force you out? Then I'll build something new, something better. He lifted her hands to his lips, pressing gentle kisses to her knuckles. I've been thinking about it, actually. That literacy program you mentioned, the one you dreamed about before life got complicated. Her heart skipped. What about it? What if we started it together? Your passion for education, my business experience, and enough funding to actually make a difference. His eyes lit up with possibility. We could help kids like Danny Morrison, kids who need someone to believe in them. The idea was beautiful and terrifying and absolutely perfect. You'd do that? Leave everything you've built? I wouldn't be leaving everything, he said softly. I'd be taking the most important thing with me. Outside the penthouse windows, the city hummed with its usual energy. Millions of people chasing success, accumulating things, building walls around their hearts. Inside, two people who'd started with a business arrangement were discovering that the best deals were the ones you made with your soul. Tomorrow would bring boardroom battles and difficult decisions, but tonight they had pizza crumbs on the carpet, plans for a future neither had imagined, and the kind of love that made everything else feel like just details. The biggest decisions of your life rarely come with clear answers, but sometimes the heart knows exactly what it needs to do. The boardroom on the 41st floor felt like a courtroom, with Theo sitting across from 12 men in expensive suits who held his professional future in their hands. Naraya watched from the reception area through glass walls, her stomach twisted in knots as she saw the tension in his shoulders, the controlled fury in his posture. She couldn't hear the words, but she could read the body language, accusatory gestures, pointed questions, Theo's jaw tightening with each exchange. Harrison emerged from the meeting looking grim. "How bad is it?" she asked. "They're giving him an ultimatum." He loosened his tie, stress radiating from every line of his body. "End the relationship and focus entirely on business, or they'll call for a vote of no confidence." "Can they do that?" "Legally, yes. The board has the power to remove a CEO if they believe he's no longer acting in the company's best interests." Harrison sat heavily in the chair beside her. "They're using the media attention, the unconventional circumstances of your marriage, even the timing of everything as evidence that he's become distracted." Through the glass, Naraya watched Theo stand abruptly, his hands flat on the conference table as he leaned forward to address the room. Whatever he said made several board members shift uncomfortably. What happens if they vote him out? He loses control of the company his father built, loses his position, his influence, probably most of his wealth. Harrison's voice was quiet. Everything he's worked for his entire adult life. The meeting dragged on for another hour. When it finally ended, the board members filed out without making eye contact with anyone. Theo emerged last. His face a mask of controlled calm that Naraya was learning meant he was holding himself together by sheer willpower. "We need to go home," he said simply. The ride up to the penthouse was silent. Once inside, Theo poured himself a scotch with steady hands, though Naraya noticed he didn't drink it. "Tell me," she said. "They want an answer by tomorrow morning." His voice was perfectly level, businesslike. "Either I commit fully to the company, which means ending our relationship and focusing solely on corporate growth, or they'll vote me out at the emergency board meeting next week." "What did you tell them?" "That I'd consider their proposal." The words hit her like ice water. "Consider it." "Naraya!" "No." She stood up from the couch, anger and hurt swirling in her chest. "I see what this is. When push came to shove, when you actually had to choose, you're considering your options. It's not that simple, isn't it?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Theo, this is the same pattern, the same safe, calculated decision-making that's ruled your entire life. When things get complicated, when real emotions are involved, you retreat into business mode. This company employs 15,000 people, Naraya. If I lose control, if the board brings in someone else, those jobs could disappear. Real families, real lives. And what about our real life?" The question came out fiercer than she'd intended. "What about what we've built together? What about Micah and the literacy program and all those plans we made? I'm trying to find a way to save both." "You can't have both." The words exploded out of her. "Sometimes life forces you to choose, Theo. Sometimes you have to decide what matters most." He set down his untouched scotch, running both hands through his hair. "You don't understand the responsibility I carry." "I understand responsibility better than anyone. I've been taking care of Micah since I was 18, remember? I've sacrificed and struggled and made impossible choices." Her voice broke slightly. "But I also understand that real love, the kind we have, doesn't come with guarantees. It requires risk. What if I choose you and everything falls apart? What if I lose the company and can't provide—" "Stop!" She moved closer to him, her voice gentling. "Theo, listen to yourself. You're still thinking like someone who believes love has to be bought and paid for, because that's all I've ever known. But it's not all you know anymore." She reached for his face, making him look at her. "You know what it feels like to be chosen for who you are, not what you can provide. You know what it's like to be loved even when you're broken, even when you're scared." Tears gathered in his eyes. "What if I'm not brave enough?" "You are. You were brave enough to end things with Vivian when you realized it was wrong. You were brave enough to carry guilt about Danny Morrison and still try to make amends. You were brave enough to let me see your scars." She smiled through her own tears. "You're the bravest man I know, Theodore Langston." For a long moment, they stood there in the golden evening light streaming through the penthouse windows, the weight of impossible decisions hanging between them. Then Theo pulled out his phone. "What are you doing?" "Calling Harrison." His voice was steady now, certain. "I'm calling an emergency press conference for tomorrow morning." "Theo, no, let me finish." He set the phone aside, taking her hands in both of his. "You're right. I've been trying to play it safe, trying to find a way to keep everything without risking anything. But that's not how love works, is it?" She shook her head, hope beginning to bloom in her chest. "I choose you," he said simply. "I choose us. I choose building something new over maintaining something that was never really mine anyway, even if it means losing everything. I already lost everything once, remember? 3 years ago in that intersection, I lost my sense of purpose, my peace, my ability to believe I deserved happiness." He lifted her hands to his lips. "And then you walked into my life and gave it all back. That's not something you can put a price on." This time, when he kissed her, it tasted like freedom. The press conference the next morning was unlike anything the business world had ever seen. Instead of damage control or corporate speak, Theo stood before a room full of reporters and spoke from his heart. "I'm stepping down as CEO of Langston International, effective immediately," he announced. "Not because I've been forced to, but because I've found something more important than profit margins and board approval." He looked directly at Naraya, who stood at the side of the room with tears streaming down her face. "I've found love. Real, complicated, transformative love with a woman who sees me for who I am, not what I can provide." His voice grew stronger. "We're starting a non-profit literacy foundation, funded by my personal assets. We're going to help kids who need someone to believe in them, honor the memory of young people like Danny Morrison, and prove that sometimes the best business decision is the one your heart makes." The questions came fast and furious, but Theo answered them all with quiet confidence. Yes, he was giving up his position by choice. Yes, he understood the financial implications. No, he had no regrets. As they walked out of the building hand in hand, reporters shouting questions behind them, Naraya felt something she'd never experienced before, the absolute certainty that she was with someone who would always choose love over fear. "So," she said, as they climbed into the car, "what do we do now?" Theo smiled, the expression transforming his entire face. "Now we go pick up Micah and tell him he's going to help us change the world. Think he'll be excited? Are you kidding? He's been waiting his whole life for an adventure." As they drove through the city toward their new future, Naraya realized that fairy tales weren't about finding perfect people or perfect circumstances. They were about finding someone willing to choose love, even when it was difficult, even when it required sacrifice, even when the ending wasn't guaranteed. They were about finding someone brave enough to build something real. 2 years later, sometimes the most beautiful endings are really just the beginning of something even more extraordinary. The morning sun filtered through the windows of the small community center in Brooklyn, casting golden rectangles across worn wooden floors where children's laughter echoed like music. Naraya stood at the front of the classroom, a book in her hands and 12 eager faces looking up at her with the kind of attention that made every sacrifice worth it. And then the little girl realized, she read, her voice carrying to the back of the room, that home wasn't the castle or the treasure. It was wherever the people who loved her were waiting. A small hand shot up. "Miss Naraya, is that why you married Mr. Theo? Because he makes you feel at home?" She smiled, catching sight of the man in question through the classroom door. He was kneeling beside 8-year-old Marcus, patiently helping him sound out words in a picture book, his expensive suit replaced by jeans and a paint-stained sweater that had seen better days. "Something like that," she answered. 2 years ago, if someone had told her she'd be running a literacy foundation with her former fake husband, living in a converted brownstone that was 1/10 the size of his penthouse, but somehow felt infinitely larger, she would have laughed. If they'd told her that Theo would spend his Saturdays teaching reading to kids who reminded him daily why he'd made the right choice, she would have thought them insane. But watching him now, his face lighting up as Marcus successfully read an entire paragraph, she couldn't imagine any other life. "Mrs. Langston?" She turned to find Danny Morrison's parents standing in the classroom doorway, their weekly visit to the foundation that bore their son's name. Over the past 2 years, Richard and Susan Morrison had become like family, helping with fundraisers, sharing Danny's story with new volunteers, and offering the kind of forgiveness that had allowed Theo to finally forgive himself. "How's our boy doing today?" Susan asked, nodding toward where Theo was now surrounded by 3 children, all competing for his attention as he helped them with their worksheets. "He's exactly where he belongs," Nariah replied, meaning every word. The Morrison Foundation had grown beyond anything they'd initially dreamed. What started as a small reading program had expanded to include art therapy, Micah's idea, tutoring services, and a scholarship fund that sent underprivileged kids to college. They'd opened 3 more locations across the city, each one filled with children who might otherwise have slipped through the cracks. More importantly, it had given Theo purpose that went beyond profit margins and board meetings. Every child who learned to read, every teenager who discovered their potential, every family they helped, it all contributed to healing that 3-year-old wound in his soul. "Miss Nariah!" Micah burst through the door, his arms full of art supplies and his face glowing with excitement. At 21, he'd grown into his role as the Foundation's art instructor, his infectious enthusiasm inspiring both children and adults alike. "Look what Sophia made." He held up a painting by one of their newest students, bold strokes of blue and yellow that captured something indefinable but beautiful. "She said it's what happiness looks like," Micah announced proudly. "Just like the pictures I painted when you got really married to Theo." Really married. 3 months ago, they'd exchanged vows again, this time in the community center garden, surrounded by the kids they served, the families they'd helped, and the friends who'd watched them build something beautiful from the ashes of corporate life. The ceremony had been nothing like the lavish affair they'd faked 2 years earlier. Nariah wore a simple white dress she'd bought off the rack, and Theo's tie was crooked because he'd been nervous. Micah had officiated, his ordination from an online ministry completely legal and absolutely perfect, and their vows had been promises made with full hearts and clear eyes. "I promise to choose you every day," Theo had said, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. "Not because of a contract or an arrangement, but because loving you has taught me who I really want to be. I promise to see you," Nariah had replied. "All of you. The businessman and the dreamer. The guilt and the grace, the fear and the courage. I promise to love every version of who you are and who you're becoming." Now, watching him help a struggling reader sound out difficult words with the patience of a saint, she marveled at how much they'd both changed. The scared young woman who'd signed a contract to save her brother had found her calling in education. The lonely billionaire who'd hired a pretend wife had discovered that the best kind of wealth was measured in lives touched and hearts healed. Nariah. Theo appeared beside her, paint smudged on his cheek and pure contentment in his expression. "The Hendersons are here for their son's evaluation." The Hendersons, an immigrant family whose 8-year-old son was struggling with dyslexia. They'd come to the foundation 3 months ago, desperate for help they couldn't afford. Now little Carlos was reading at grade level and dreaming of becoming a teacher himself. "I'll be right there," she said, then stood on her tiptoes to wipe the paint from his face. "You've got a little—" "Thanks." He caught her hand, pressing a quick kiss to her palm. Such a small gesture, but it still made her heart skip after all this time. As she walked toward the conference room, Nariah caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. She looked older, maybe, laugh lines more pronounced and hair often escaping whatever style she'd attempted that morning. But she also looked settled, content, like someone who'd found her place in the world. The meeting with the Hendersons went well. Carlos qualified for their advanced program, and his parents cried with relief as they signed the enrollment forms. Afterward, as the center began to empty for the day, Nariah found herself in their small office, updating files and thinking about the children they'd helped, the families they'd served, the lives that had been changed. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Theo's voice came from the doorway. "Just thinking about how far we've come." She looked up to find him leaning against the frame, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, looking more handsome than he had in any of those expensive suits. "Do you ever miss it? The corporate world, the power, the money?" He was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. "I miss the certainty sometimes," he said finally, knowing exactly what was expected, having clear metrics for success. He moved into the office, settling into the chair across from her desk. "But I don't miss feeling empty. I don't miss wondering if anyone would care about me if I lost everything. And now you know. Now I know that everything I thought mattered was just noise." He reached across the desk to take her hand. "You, Micah, these kids, this work, this is what matters. This is what lasts." Through the window, they could see the community garden, where local families grew vegetables and children learned about responsibility by caring for growing things. Beyond that, the city stretched toward the horizon, full of people chasing success and accumulating possessions and forgetting what it meant to be truly wealthy. "I have a surprise for you," Theo said, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. "What kind of surprise?" The kind that might make you cry, he grinned. Good tears, I hope. She opened the envelope to find a letter from the Department of Education, official seals and formal language that took her a moment to parse. When she understood what she was reading, her hands began to shake. Theo, this is a federal grant for $2 million to expand the foundation nationwide. They want to use our model in 20 cities. His voice was soft with pride and amazement. We did this, Naraya. We built something that matters. She was crying now, good tears just as he'd predicted, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they'd accomplished and the possibilities stretching ahead of them. Danny Morrison would be proud, she whispered. I think so too. Later that evening, they sat on the fire escape outside their brownstone apartment, sharing Chinese takeout and watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. Micah was inside, video calling his girlfriend, a sweet art teacher he'd met at a foundation fundraiser who saw past his limitations to the beautiful soul underneath. Do you think we would have found each other if it hadn't been for the contract? Naraya asked, curled against Theo's side. I don't know, he answered honestly. I was so closed off, so convinced that love was just another business transaction. You might have walked right past me in a coffee shop and I would have been too afraid to say hello. But we did find each other. We did. And maybe that's the real miracle. Not that we fell in love, but that we had the courage to choose it over everything else. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Naraya thought about the girl who'd signed a contract 2 years ago, desperate and scared and convinced that love was a luxury she couldn't afford. That girl had no idea that agreeing to pretend to love Theodore Langston would teach her what real love actually looked like. It looked like choosing someone every day, even when it was hard. It looked like building dreams together instead of alone. It looked like taking the broken pieces of 2 different lives and creating something beautiful from the fragments. It looked like home. I love you, Theodore Langston, she said into the warm evening air. I love you too, Naraya Evans Langston, he replied, and the sound of her real name, her chosen name, still made her smile. Somewhere in the distance, the city hummed with its endless energy. But here on a fire escape in Brooklyn, 2 people who'd learned that the best contracts were written by the heart sat in perfect contentment, watching the stars come out and knowing they'd found everything they'd ever need. The fairy tale was complete, but the love story, the real one, was just beginning. Sometimes the greatest love stories start with the worst reasons, but they always end with the choice to stay, to grow, and to build something beautiful together. What kind of love story would you write if you had the courage to tear up every contract and follow your heart instead? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.